Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. I do truly appreciate it. And something I'm not too excited about, I tend to be making much more of a habit of spending time in hotel rooms. And it's not the fun kind of travel, it's work, making a living, which I guess such is life. One shouldn't complain about making a living. However, I wanted to talk to you today about a book that I finally read, finally finished reading. I started reading this book and really enjoyed it, but some things kind of kicked in. Commitment to read another book with my wife, did some interrupting, and then another book popped in, did some interrupting, plus other things, busy, traveling and such. So I've taken a lot longer to read this book than I should have, than I wanted to, but it is Little Heaven by Nick Cutter. And the only reason I ever even knew this book existed was because of a fellow by the name of Paul Miller. Ever hear of him? Well, if not, by all means, hear of him. Paul Miller is the guy that owns Earthling Publications, a publisher, publishes limited edition books, and this is not one of his books. He published a beautiful, fabulous, high quality, signed limited edition version of this book in his Modern Classics series. And I'll put a link in the description. I think there are some available, not many left. But he published it. I took his word for it. It was a great book. I bought it. And traveling and such, I don't tend to tote around limited edition books with me in suitcases and hotels. So this paperback book, trade size paperback, made the trips. Took a little bit of abuse, but it did the trick. I got it done. I got it read. It's the first book I ever read of Nick Cutter. I feel like that might be a crime, but hey, I am on my way to remedying that. I've read and completed Little Heaven, and I actually really enjoyed this book. I'm glad I took Paul Miller's word for it. I'm glad I bought that book and got it secured on my shelves. So it's mine now. But also, I'm really glad I got to read this book. It actually relatively is as advertised. It's one of the books. A lot of times you read a book, you read the synopsis, what they tell you about the book here, and then you actually read the book and it doesn't fit. This one actually, for me, fit pretty well. I think I got the tone and the tenor, the feel, the vibe pretty well from what I'd read about this book. So whoever did the description writing did pretty dadgum good. But Little Heaven, it turned out to be as good as I hoped it would be. So I thought it would be pretty good. It turned out to be pretty good. So hey, I went in expecting such and I got exactly such. But anyway, Little Heaven, it bounced around a little bit. I think it was 1966 to 1980. So there's a little bouncing. And in general, that's not something that I like. It worked out fine in this book, though. It wasn't really a problem for me. You start out, I think it was 1980, and you're being introduced to this guy named Micah Shagru and his wife Ellen and his daughter Petty, like Richard Petty, the daughter Petty. But anyway, you're introduced to these three. And Petty wanders off at night and runs into a sort of a monster. And this is something here, this part reminded me a little bit of some things. A little bit of Phantoms, yo. Phantoms, Dean Koontz Phantoms. Not specifically, but I was brought back to Phantoms, some description of monster developing and all that stuff. Also, this book, in ways, reminds me of Stephen King's It. So forget about the group of friends in it. That's not there. They're replaced with a group of killers, outlaws, if you will, in a way. But they're characters you can get behind, so they're not awful, dastardly, hateful characters. A group of killers. But anyway, the monster abducts Micah's daughter. And Micah's a guy with a history, which you will now start to learn from. And it goes back into a story, back in time, into 66, I think, where Micah Shagru, I guess that's how you would say his name, Micah Shagru, is introduced to a fella named Ebenezer. and a lady named Minerva, and they go out on a journey, a case, sort of a case. They're killers, and they have a very tenuous relationship. They're not exactly friends. In fact, Minerva and Ebenezer are quite the opposite. One of them wants to kill the other so bad. Anyway, they go out on a case to help this girl, this lady, Ellen, find her nephew who has been not abducted, but her father joins a religious cult out in the forest, a place called Little Heaven, a little compound. And she wants them to take her to see Nate, her nephew, just to make sure that Nate's okay. Pretty much that's it. Well, they, this band of outlaws who don't really belong together, and Ellen, they go and they find Little Heaven, and they find a whole lot more than they bargained for. And that's the synopsis tells you as much. They find a whole lot more than they bargained for. But the book occasionally will jump back into the 1980-ish area as they prepare now to go find his daughter, Petty, Micah's daughter, Petty. So you kind of have two stories. One's the backstory that takes up the bulk of the book. And there's a lot of stuff going on. A Jim Jones type character, a very charismatic religious leader, and his God, or what he thinks is his God, and his God's children, and other children. Anyway, lots and lots of stuff going on here. Gunplay, killers doing killer stuff, tanks, modified tanks, really cool stuff in this book. I thoroughly enjoyed it from start to finish. It's pretty long for what I think is the simplicity of the story. This paperback version here from Gallery Books was 486 pages. 486 pages. And I did really like this book. I'll rate it right now 4 out of 5 stars easily. A very, very good book that I thoroughly enjoyed. I think the biggest knock on it was that it did feel long. I mean, it's 486 is not huge, but it felt long. It felt every bit of that 486 pages. Anyway, I like the story. I really like the characters. Micah Shagru, a great character. Ellen, who we'll get to know in this book. In the beginning, it's his wife, and she's sort of in a catatonic state. So you can figure that out when you read the book, what's going on there. It explains it very well. Ellen, in the earlier part, when it goes back to the 66 version or time period, she's a great character. Minerva, the other two outlaws, Ebenezer and Minerva, both fabulous characters, great characters. This would make a great movie if you had actors that could pull it off and a writer and director that wouldn't screw it up like they often do. But it would make a great book because if they did it right, you would have some really cool characters that you would probably love. And a kid named Nate. He's a neat kid too. But Nick Cutter wrote this book, Little Heaven, and after reading it, I gotta read more from Nick Cutter. So what I'm gonna ask you now, if you care, me in my hotel room in Fort Myers, Florida, undisclosed location. Which Nick Cutter book should I go after next? Because I'm going to go after another Nick Cutter book. Whether anybody publishes a cool limited edition version of it or not, I want to read more from Nick Cutter. So hook a brother up with a little knowledge, a little advice. What should I read next? If you have read some. If you have not, then just lie about it. Make it up. I don't care. No, I'm joking. Anyway, Little Heaven is a strong recommend for people that read this kind of stuff. So I wouldn't recommend it to my wife. Her reading tastes and mine are a lot different, although we're trying to bridge the gap, reading some common books, which is why I delayed finishing this book by quite a piece. We're working on reading some together. I had to read a Kristen Hanna book, which I was amazed at how much I liked it. I gotta say. Really liked it. I'm gonna have to do a review on that. I'll have to get her to join me on that though. But Little Heaven, I recommend you go check out Earthling Publications, their Modern Classics. Fabulous edition. I did a video on it. Look it up. I'll put it in the description as well if you're looking for it. So, strong recommend for Nick Cutter's Little Heaven, a national best-selling author. He at least sold me 2 books anyway. One very expensive and one's a lot more affordable. But that being said, I can think of no more lies to tell. So thank you for your time. I do truly appreciate it. And say la vie, baby. Doo-doo.